Welcome back to the show. Thanks for being here. Thanks for spending your time with us here today. And I'm really honored to have Craig Floyd on the show today. Over the past 4 decades, Craig has been one of law enforcement's leading advocates. He's the founder and president of Citizens Behind the Badge. It's a nonprofit advocacy organization formed in 2020 to end the disastrous defund and defame the police movement. And it also ensures that our nation's top law enforcement officials receive the support and resources needed to keep America safe. Craig, you probably recognize the name and the face. He's also the founding chief executive officer emeritus of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. It's a nonprofit organization established in 1984 to honor the service and sacrifices of America's law enforcement officers. He retired from that role in 2018, but he continues to do some incredible work. Craig Floyd, how you doing, sir?
Hey, Travis, this is such a pleasure. You and I go back quite a ways, and we haven't had a chance to connect much recently. So thanks for having me
Yeah.
on your show.
Yeah, people would be kind of shocked if they knew how far back we went, but it was in the 2000s, early 2000s. I think we started talking about some police driving stuff, and obviously the memorial is it's legendary, Craig. And I think before we get going, because I want to get into the work you're doing now, because I think it's so unique. So few people, so few leaders are willing and open to talk about the truths that you and your organization are talking about. So I think it's very impressive. It's very credible. But before that, I think most people are going to want to know the answer to. I mean, you were there when the memorial was built, essentially, right? I mean, you were there from the pretty much the very beginning, maybe the beginning. Don't want to insult you. Kind of tell us that story, how you sort of fell into that, and of course, everybody's going to know about all the milestones there at the memorial that has gone on in the past 30, 40 years.
Oh, it was such a privilege, really, to have the opportunity to lead the effort to build a National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial and then ultimately build a National Law Enforcement Museum to go with it. My days go back to Congressman Mario Biaggi. He was a New York City congressman. I got paired up with him right out of college. I wanted to work on Capitol Hill. He was hiring. We got paired up, and the rest, as they say, is history. I didn't even realize his reputation at the time. He served for 23 years as a New York City cop, and he was the most decorated cop in New York City history when he retired in 1965. He had been wounded 10 times in the line of duty, received the department's highest award, the Medal of Honor for Valor. And, he went on to serve 20 years of distinguished service in the United States Congress. I worked for him as his legislative aide for 10 of those years. And every piece of law enforcement related legislation seemed to come through our office. Obviously, he was the champion for law enforcement during his 20 years in Congress. And there was a initiative that was brought to his attention back in the 70s, actually, to build a National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. And it kind of languished for a while, didn't go anywhere. And then when I started working for him, a group of officers came into his office, said, we'd love to see that National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial legislation revived. And we introduced a new bill at that time in 1981, I believe it was. And in 1984, it became law. And it said basically, we're going to establish a National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial somewhere in the nation's capital. And it was up to us to find the land, to raise the money, to create a design. And all of that work was done under my leadership. He designated me as the executive director of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. So I had the privilege of leading that effort from day one. And in 1991, we dedicated the National Memorial. And then we decided, hey, let's augment the memorial with a National Law Enforcement Museum to tell the story of American law enforcement and the story behind the names of the 24,000 plus officers whose names are on that memorial wall. And that museum was dedicated in 2018. It took us 20 years to raise all the money and get the site and create a design and do construction work. But 20 years after we started, we dedicated that museum in 2018. I retired, was happy to get back to my family and other pursuits on a more pleasurable basis. And then all hell broke loose in 2020 when George Floyd died, and I decided to get back in the game and start this new group called Citizens Behind the Badge. So that's basically my story. I love advocating for law enforcement. Never wore the badge myself, but have met thousands of officers around this country, and I know their story. I know what's in their heart more than most Americans do, and I'm proud to be an advocate for them and mobilize the American public and their support.
Well, it's that's a just incredible story. I mean, obviously, God had you placed there at that location in time, and the outcome is obvious. I mean, to anyone in law enforcement, even if they haven't been to that memorial, there's a reverence there that's pretty incredible. And one thing that always impressed me, Craig, and I was there for, unfortunately, multiple police weeks, which is the week that we honor fallen officers year to year. And I would see you hustling around, from one place to another. You'd always stop and talk to me. You'd always stop and talk to my wife. You always had time for everybody. And so you were a little more than just a fundraiser. I will tell you that. You are one of I think it's no question about it. When it comes to advocacy, I can't think of anybody else that has done it more than you. And so, was it a tough decision? Because I'm only assuming that you kind of retire and you've had all this glorious and great things that happen, and what a blessing to get to sort of retire with those milestones, and then you see 2020 happen. Is this what spurred you to get involved in Citizens Behind the Badge?
Well, absolutely. As I said, I was very happy in retirement, doing a lot of the things I never had a chance to do during my 34 years at the helm of the Memorial Fund. And I was glad to have every day at the Memorial Fund. No regrets there at all. But now I was doing other things. And, it just bugged the hell out of me when, everybody started crucifying law enforcement. I remember an Atlanta police officer, I quote him off, and he said, almost overnight, everybody started hating police. And I'm like, what is going on here? Wait a minute. 2019, the year before George Floyd died, we had one of the safest years in American history. All right. Crime was at its lowest levels, had been for some time, and it was due to the great work that our police officers were doing. We had never been better prepared for that job than ever before. We were doing the best job ever in law enforcement in American history up until that point. And yet, George Floyd dies, and people are saying, let's abolish police, let's reimagine police, let's defund police, calling them brutal racists. And I just said, wait a minute, I know the facts. I know the data does not support that image. And I want to get back in the game here. We need a voice of support, a voice of reason. And the media doesn't like that because they love controversy. They love when people are attacking police, and when it appears that maybe a police officer did something wrong, the media goes berserk. They love a good story like that. And they create those stories. They basically select the facts, the figures, the anecdotes, the video that they decide to show on to the public. And I know what the facts really are. I know the stories. And I said, we got to do something to counter these media lies, these politicians that are out there bashing cops because it seems to be the right thing to do at that time. The way the wind's blowing, that's the way politicians are. And so we created Citizens Behind the Badge, and really the name says it all. The vast majority of American people support police. They respect police. They want them to go out and do their jobs effectively and safely. And they rally behind them. I mean, think about it. When a cop dies in any community in this country, thousands of people are out there on the side of the road, hand over their heart as the hearse goes by with the officer. And, it just shows you there is great respect and support for law enforcement in this country, but nobody was mobilizing it in 2020 after George Floyd died. And that's what Citizens Behind the Badge is all about. It's about mobilizing and amplifying the voice of the American people in support of law enforcement. And I think we've done a pretty good job over the last 6 years rallying that support. Now we're refunding police. All right. Now crime is going down again. We're having more officers joining the profession. And as a result, we're getting the public is safe once again. It shouldn't have taken 6 years to figure that out.
Yeah. I think people forget how wild and crazy that time frame was. And you're right. It was like overnight. And it's almost like I've described this as almost as people were just brainwashed. Like all of a sudden, all the things that they knew, they forgot. And there was just this one narrative from something that may have happened hundreds or thousands of miles away. I mean, and quite frankly, Craig, obviously we talk about leadership on this podcast. I was not only disappointed in what some politicians were saying, but our own leaders were sometimes saying things that weren't making it better. I mean, if a school teacher does a heinous crime 1,000 miles away, you don't see every superintendent coming out talking about that crime because it has nothing to do with that superintendent. And, and because every profession has problems, but in our profession, it just seems so strange to me. There were so many leaders talking about that event and talking about all these other police events that didn't know anything about that event. Of course, now today we all look back and go, "Oh, there was a lot we didn't know about all that." And as you said, and then we saw the reforms that came after that, and that came from internal. Yeah, there was some political and legislation that brought some reforms, but there was a lot of police leaders that just made the decision to change policing. And you termed it as reimagining, which was a common term. But they didn't really step back and think, what's the repercussions of this? So it's not shocking to me that our crime spiked in 2020, 2021, and sort of started peaking in 2022. It's not a shock to me that officer assaults and officer injuries are at an all-time high as we speak. Every year since 2020, Craig, they have increased to the tune of 86,000 in 2024, the last year we have the data. No one's talking about that. Yes, our line of duty deaths have dropped. That's great. A lot of that's to medical technology. But when you look at the assault rate, they're going higher and higher and higher. And it's hard to not think that has something to do with the support that was lacking for a while, leadership, combination of the reforms that nobody seems to want to go back and look at and see if these reforms actually made things better or made things worse.
Without question. And clearly all the anti-police rhetoric that started occurring right after George Floyd died had so much to do with this disrespect for law and order in this country, disrespect for the men and women who were enforcing the laws. And I think that was the real problem. All of a sudden, it almost seemed it was okay not to comply when a police officer would pull you over for a traffic violation. It got ridiculous. And, what we needed to do to have some common sense take over after George Floyd's death, we needed to go to the facts and the figures. Okay. Let's look at it a little bit piecemeal. People said they're brutal. Okay. They use excessive force unnecessarily. And they pointed to George Floyd's death as the poster child for it. The bottom line is, and you know this better than anybody, of the more than 60 million interactions each year in this country between law enforcement and the public, all right, that's traffic stops, pedestrian stops, calls for help, you name it. Force is used by officers, force of any kind is used by officers less than 2% of the time. It hardly ever happens, all right? And you mentioned, last year, 86,000 assaults against law enforcement officers in this country by criminals. And officers have lethal force. They have a weapon at their side that they could easily use in those instances. But we find that only 1,000 people each year, roughly, are killed by officers, shot and killed during those confrontations. I think that's an amazing show of restraint myself. It's good training, good professionalism exhibited by the officers. They don't want to shoot anybody. They don't want to hurt anybody. And most of the time they never do. But the media will zero in on that one time where it might have happened, or 1,000 deaths occur in a year when there's 86,000 assaults against police officers. They don't talk about that part of the equation. And then they talk about officers being systemic racism in law enforcement. Forget it. The facts do not support that. Again, there may be good anecdotes that the media can pull up from time to time, isolated as they are. But the facts tell us, and this is documented year after year in the Department of Justice, you'll find that about 10% of all whites, 10% of all blacks, and 10% of all Hispanics are stopped by police. That's pedestrian stops, traffic stops. All right. There is no indication that cops are targeting blacks or targeting Hispanics. It's 10% across the board. All right. And these are the facts. And you do study after study. They look at individual departments. They look at the entire profession. No incident is found of brutal use of force by officers, nor is there any systemic racism in law enforcement. And yet those facts and figures were totally ignored for 2 or 3 years while crime went rampant in this country. Officers were being shot and killed. Ambush attacks were on the rise against officers, and that got us into a real mess. And now finally we're getting some common sense back in the game, and people are looking more at those numbers.
Well, I don't usually get challenged on my data, Craig, but you came smoking today. You know exactly what you're talking about. And I keep thinking to myself, I need to clone you and put you over the IECP and PERF and the police chiefs at major city police chiefs. We need more people spitting out these facts because you're dead on with that data. Because that's what people need to hear. They're hearing so much from the media narrative that no one's hearing this, but we have leaders in every police department that can speak up and talk about it. I'm not going to put you in a bad spot and ask you why that's not happening. They get that enough from me. But I do want to talk about the positive things you're doing with Citizens Behind the Badge, because your content and your articles is fighting this narrative. And did you just sort of think that needed to be done early on, because it's morphed into something that everybody needs to pay attention to?
Well, I really feel good about how we've evolved as an organization. In the beginning, it was let's stop the defund and defame the police movement. All right. And that was our goal. Weren't sure exactly how we were going to get it done because, I'm basically a one-man operation here to some extent. I have a great leadership group. All right. Volunteer leaders. These are former law enforcement leaders that I've worked with throughout my career. And I brought them on board to give me the expertise and experience that we needed so that our voice would have some reliability, all right, credibility. And I love these guys, 18 law enforcement leaders on our National Law Enforcement Advisory Council. So what I've done a lot lately, especially, and I think it's getting good traction, and you've been a big help with Law Officer, is getting op-eds written by these experienced and expert law enforcement leaders on various issues. All right. For instance, just this past week, we released an op-ed on Substack, and it was published before that on Law Officer. And it's a police chief, Tom Weitzel, from out in Illinois.
Yeah, Tom's been on the show.
Tom's a great guy,
Yeah.
and I love the guy. But he, for 15 years, he told me, has been advocating for making the murder of a police officer a federal offense. All right. And there's been a bill in Congress, back the Blue Act, that would do that, more or less. All right. And it's languished. All right. There hasn't been any traction, even though now we have a Republican controlled Congress or Republican in the White House. You would think maybe a bill like that would go somewhere, because if we make murdering a police officer a federal offense, it makes the suspect, the convicted killer, subject to the death penalty if that applies. So and you would have much better prosecution, investigatory professionals coming to that city or state, helping the locals investigate the crime and ultimately convict that killer. So this is an example of what we're trying to do, is take advantage of this great wealth of expertise and knowledge and experience that we have, and get the word out. Talk about what the facts are when it comes to issues like killing a cop, why we need tougher penalties. I mean, you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said it's more dangerous now than ever for police officers. The fatality figures this past year went down dramatically. I think the total number of officers killed in the line of duty last year was 111. That was the lowest fatality figure for officers in more than 80 years. But as you point out, 350 or so officers were actually shot last year. And that's been true for the last few years. We've had more officers shot than ever before, and more officers assaulted than ever before. And part of it's better emergency medical care. Part of it is more officers wearing their vests, and better driver training. All of that has made a difference. But boy, it's a dangerous place to be if you're a police officer walking the streets of this country.
Yeah, and Craig, we don't want our audience to know this, that you're not just talking about officer safety now, but when you were at the National Law Enforcement Memorial, you guys excel at honoring officers, but you played a major role in all kinds of programs to make officers safer. And so those programs still exist. And so that's so vital and so important. Where do you sense the profession is going? You talked about the crime rate has been lowered, recruiting has improved somewhat, although we could use it to be improved a little more. Where do you sense in the next? You've got a good beat on things. Where do you sense the next 5 to 10 years we're looking at with law enforcement? I'll wet your tongue, but this is obviously we see AI out there. I don't think we see the criminal element changing at all. I don't think we see politicians and the media doing what they do much at all. But where do you see law enforcement adapting and try to make those areas better?
Well, here's the big problem I see. The big concern is that we've had a tremendous brain drain. All right. Because of the defund and defame the police movement, we lost roughly 40,000 officers. All right. If you look at the total number of officers serving in 2019 versus how many were serving a couple years after George Floyd's death, say in 2022, 40,000 lost officers, many of them experienced veterans, all right, and a lot of them leaders, all right, chiefs, sheriffs, top commanders at major departments around this country. They'd had enough, all right. They were being defunded, they were being defamed. They knew they perhaps could go to jail for simply doing their job. All right, it seemed to be, anything goes when it came to going after police officers during the defund the police movement. So, because we've lost so many of those veteran officers, we've lost all their experience, all their expertise, all their institutional knowledge. It'll take a generation to get that back. All right. You can't do that overnight by just going out and hiring a bunch of new people to take their place. All right. We got a lot of new people coming in. I think the training in the profession has gotten better than ever. So hopefully the new guys coming in and gals, they're going to be better prepared for that job than ever before. But I'm just so worried about what we lost during the last few years. Some really good people, and many of them were my friends, and I hated to see them leave the profession. That's the bad news. The good news is you're right. Technology has improved to levels that we've never seen before. So, and because of the defund movement, we found law enforcement could do more with less. All right, they had to figure it out. It's like when a professional sports team. You get a couple injured players. You got to figure out how those new guys that probably wouldn't have been on the field otherwise, they get a chance to do their job. All right. And now we're finding that law enforcement is able to do more with less. They're getting smarter. And technology is a big part of that. I think AI, artificial intelligence, is going to improve things to a level we've never seen before. And hopefully we can outdistance the criminal element because they have access to a lot of that same technology, certainly to AI, and they're going to get better and smarter too. So we've got to, I think the key here, and we said it early on, Travis, is we got to refund and give our officers the resources they need to do their jobs effectively and safely. And I think we're starting to see that once again, because we saw what happens when you take away those resources, when you don't have the personnel at the levels you need. So many of the major departments are still way understaffed. And it's going to take them years really to get back to where they need to be, back to their allocated force. And once they are, and with this new technology, and because we're smarter, I think law enforcement is going to be in a really good place in a few years. But like I said, we lost a lot of good people, and it's going to take time to get that back.
Man, we could talk for days, Craig. I mean, it's right up my alley. And you talking about having your finger on the pulse. You're right about the experience. You're right about what that has had. You said it was a generational issue. It's going to take a generation, and I have to agree with you. I tend to agree with you. Tell us how people can reach out to you. Obviously, behindthebadge.org is the website. They can donate there. They can contact you there. Just give us some information about the organization.
Yeah, I wish people would visit our website. I mean, it is packed full of information. A lot of what I've talked to you about today, a lot of those facts and figures are there. We have a site where we every week we pay tribute to a fallen officer. I call it Heroes Live Forever. It's the name of a podcast, fairly brief, 5 to 7 minute tributes to fallen officers. We tell their stories so they'll always be remembered and honored. We also have another podcast we do every couple weeks. It's called Heroes Behind the Badge. And we interview a lot of the kind of people that you're interviewing on your show, law enforcement leaders, many of whom have heroic stories. And we like to share those stories because most of the public, this is interesting, only 1 out of 5 Americans has any interaction with a law enforcement officer during the course of a year. And most of those are traffic stops, right? So most people don't have a good sense of who these people are that serve the law enforcement profession, people like yourself. And we want them to get to know these people and hear their stories of heroism, of compassion. I mean, I always tell Travis about when I walk down the street and a homeless man comes up, harassing you as they often do downtown here in our nation's capital. And every cop I'm with, whenever that happens, they open their wallet up and they pull out some money and give it to that homeless person, where typically I would walk away. That's the kind of heart these men and women have in law enforcement. So you hear those stories on our website. We tell those stories. And obviously, we, like all nonprofits, rely on public support. We get no government money at all. So what we do, it's on a shoestring really, but we're pretty effective with social media, with technology today. You can do a lot with a little bit of money, and we rely on the American public to support us. So there is a donation button on there as well. But I just want people to go to that website and hear the stories, get to know the facts and the figures, so they can counter their friends who are maybe less informed. When they start talking about police being bad people, they can come right back at them and tell them, these men and women, more than 24,000, have sacrificed their lives in the line of duty, and their names are on that national memorial. And that's how much these men and women care about our country and are willing to risk it for our safety. So let's give them the due credit, please.
Yeah, you've got to check the website out, behindthebadge.org. It is incredible. Craig is right. He's not inflating that. It is an incredible resource to go to like, subscribe to the newsletter, give them a little bit of money, folks. We need more people talking about this information. If you think that's drinking through a fire hose talking to Craig Floyd today, plug into what they're doing, because it comes across my feed all the time, from the podcast to the articles. It's something that every American needs. Craig Floyd, I can't thank you enough for what you've done. And it's amazing for you to tell these stories in law enforcement. You talk about officers sticking money out and I've seen all of it. You talk about officers not wanting to use force. Yeah, every officer I know can tell you stories. So you have been plugged in for decades, and you're such a great spokesperson for this profession. I can't thank you enough for what you do. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Travis. If we have one moment, I'd love to share one quick story. A homeless man showed up at a police officer's funeral not too long ago, and I happened to interview the officer's wife. And I said, "What do you remember about the funeral?" And she said, "The only thing that stands out was this homeless man came up to me, and he said, 'You don't know me, but I'm here to pay my respects to your husband, that fallen officer, because every night before he went home to you and your children, he stopped to check on me. He wanted to make sure I was okay.'" And to me, that epitomizes what our law enforcement, who they are, what's in their heart. And those are the men and women that we need to give the proper due respect and support for.
Indeed. And one way to do that is to go to Citizens Behind the Badge at behindthebadge.org. Craig Floyd, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Travis. Appreciate being with you, my friend.
And if you've been watching and you've been listening, just remember, lead on and stay courageous.